Hey there, HorseCenter fans. Matt and I are back with another exciting edition of the show. Matt, this week we lead off with the Midsummer Derby.
We certainly do. We got the Travers and a bunch of graded stakes races on the undercard.
Yeah, the Travers, the test. We'll also talk Ellis Park Derby with art collector Matt. Watch it all right here on HorseCenter. Welcome to another edition of HorseCenter, everyone. I am Brian Zipsy, and as always, I have the terrific pleasure of being joined by my co-host to the East Coast. That's Matt Shipman. How are you today, Matt?
I am good, Brian. We got the big Travers Day card at Saratoga coming up, the Midsummer Derby, 3 weeks earlier. So I guess it's kind of more midsummer this year.
Yeah, 4 weeks before the Kentucky Derby. So everything's a little bit wacky, Matt, in this crazy year of 2020. The one thing that hasn't been too crazy, though, is the performances of Tiz the Law. He just keeps doing what he's doing. You know, he's not racing every month, but he's been ultra impressive in 3 starts this year: the Holy Bull, the Florida Derby, the Belmont Stakes. Now he comes to Saratoga, where he made his career debut last year as a pretty big favorite in the Travers, Matt. Tiz the Law surely is the one to beat in Saturday's Travers.
Yeah, he certainly is the one to beat. And, you know, when you're handicapping a race like the Travers in August, you've got to be thinking about the question, which of these 8 3-year-olds in the field are going to have anything left in the tank at the end of the 1.25 mile distance.
Right, and that could be a question for Tiz the Law. He's never been farther than 9 furlongs, but the son of Constitution, a grandson of Tappet, trained by the patient veteran Barclay Tagg, has given no indication of having any distance limitations in those 9 furlong races. In fact, his 2 longest races, the Florida Derby and the Belmont, he sure looked awfully good at the finish of those, Matt. First time in 1.25 miles on a track he's familiar with. I don't suspect it'll be a problem for a horse who really puts himself in good position early in these races.
I agree with you, Brian. He should get the distance, and the way you described him is what is so good about Tiz the Law. He's one of those talented horses who does what you said, puts himself in position, not far behind the early pace, always sitting in a nice spot on the outside to make his rally. And when he goes, he's been pretty impressive, winning races by 3-4 lengths and seemingly with energy left in the tank.
Absolutely. And you know, if there's any knock on Tiz the Law this year, not necessarily by me, but what I've read or what I've seen people talking about, is the fact that he hasn't beaten really strong horses yet. I'm not sure he'll find it in the Travers, but he looks like a legitimate 4 to 5 shot or so in here, Matt, and certainly the horse to beat. But on the other hand, Saratoga is the graveyard of champions. Tiz the Law is not a champion yet, but he looks well on his way to becoming one. A lot of upsets last week, including a couple big ones at Saratoga. Is he vulnerable? Is it maybe the Bob Baffert horse, Uncle Chuck, coming in from California, Matt, 2 for 2?
Yeah, and you know, the last several years, the Travers has not been very kind to the favorites. That's just a historic reference. And yes, you brought up Uncle Chuck and Bob Baffert. Here we go again, Brian. We've been down this path before so many times, with Baffert bringing horses to Saratoga, highly touted. Uncle Chuck, I guess, is the perfect example of that. 2 races last time in the Los Al Derby, 2 big length victories against not large fields. Now coming to Saratoga, having to go the 1.25 miles. Uncle Chuck is as hyped and maybe has the potential of any of the horses that Baffert has brought up, but you know, he's got to tackle a horse like Tiz the Law, and he hasn't had to do that before. Although in the Los Al Derby, he beat Thousand Words, and Thousand Words came back with a big victory last weekend. So he was flattered in that regard.
Yeah, he was flattered a little bit by the performance of Thousand Words, upsetting Honor AP in the Shared Belief last week. Uncle Chuck's had 2 races. He's won them by a combined 11 lengths out in California, Santa Anita, and then, of course, Los Alamitos. I've heard people say, okay, this is Arrogate Part 2 or even another West Coast, but I would warn people that are saying that those horses at least had more experience than Uncle Chuck. Uncle Chuck's literally only had 2 races. Even Arrogate had 4 races before he came to Saratoga. Uncle Chuck, I thought, was a little green even in his last performance in the Los Al Derby. So 1.25 miles against a horse like Tiz the Law, I don't think it's an easy ask for a 3rd lifetime race. And as a heavy second favorite, Matt, I'm going to try to beat him out of the top 2. I think that 1.25 miles might be tough. Certainly on paper, on speed figures, he does look like the second best horse in the race, deserving second favorite. But I think what Bafford's done in the Travers recently, I think Uncle Chuck is going to be bet even lower than maybe he should be on paper. So let's look at some of the others in here. I expect Chad Brown might have the 3rd choice, and that's Country Grammar. He's listed as the third choice here at 6-1 with Max Player, but I just have a feeling that they might get on the Chad Brown bandwagon a lot. Country Grammar is a horse who looks like he's made a steady improvement. The Peter Pan didn't thrill me necessarily, Matt, but he's made an improvement. He's got a graded stakes win over the track.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it's worth noting that he is the son of Tonalist. And of course, Tonalist won the Belmont Stakes back in, I think it was 2014. So maybe the distance is something that Country Grammar will be able to handle. I agree. The victory in the Peter Pan, which was by a narrow margin, didn't thrill me either. He got the best trip in there, a nice ground saving run up the rail. Everything seemed to go his way. He's coming back in 3 weeks, which is not a big deal for me, but for trainer Chad Brown, that is unusual. But Chad didn't have a choice. He's never won the Travers. He grew up around Saratoga. If there's one race left that Chad would want to win, it would be the Travers. So he's, in my opinion, he's taken a shot with Country Grammar.
Yeah, it only makes sense that Chad Brown will continue to take shots in the Travers, although I think he's probably had a few horses better than Country Grammar in Travers past. And, you're right. Country Grammar really did take advantage of the rail opening up for him nicely in the Peter Pan. He was game late, and he kind of came back on the rail against Caracaro to get that win. Like I said, he's steady improvement, but I don't think, just like Uncle Chuck, I wonder about the value as a bettor. I wonder about the value in him. Like I say, I'm projecting him as the 3rd choice, and I think there are at least one other horse who's better than Country Grammar, who will be bet no more, if not a little bit less than Country Grammar. Of course, I'm talking about Max Player, and Max Player's a horse I've liked a little bit moving forward. The Son of Honor code. I thought in the Belmont he was making a move on the turn, and then he kind of lost momentum. I don't know if he got hit in the face with a little dirt or what happened there, but it looked like he lost momentum when he was starting his run. Then he was spanned 7 wide. Rallied pretty nicely in the Belmont. This is a horse who only ran in 2 turns races before the Belmont. The Belmont, of course, this year was 1 turn, but I thought it was a nice enough effort. Linda Rice continues the pattern of giving him plenty of time, continues to work well. I think Max Player, it's a little dependent, especially Saratoga this year, a little dependent on the pace and the way these jockeys have been kind of letting things go with an easy pace early in these races. But I think Max Player should be finishing well in this 1.25 mile race. And to me, after the top 2, he's the one that makes the most sense.
Yeah, and I think Linda Rice has done a really nice job making the best of a tough situation, because Max Player was one of the horses who flashed his talent and got some wins early on in the original Kentucky Derby Trail at Aqueduct. Racing got halted, so Rice took the situation and said, hey, I'm going to give a horse that I think has got a lot of talent some time to grow up and mature. The Wood Memorial never happened, which was a goal. They opted to wait even more for the Belmont Stakes. And I agree with what you said. His third place run makes it seem like he will handle the 10 furlong distance pretty well.
Yeah, and maybe he missed the Wood Memorial, and maybe Linda Rice decided not to take him out of town. But I think it's worked out very well for him. He looked like a horse who needed a little more time to develop, but he's been awfully good. Even having said that, way back in the Withers, he didn't beat the strongest field in the Withers, but he zoomed right by in the stretch, finished well, as he's finished well all of his races. I think 1.25 miles should suit him fine, and there is some speed in here. So I think the pace won't be something like we saw in last week's Whitney, for example. So Max Blair is the horse I like if we're trying to beat the favorite Tiz the Law, and we're trying to beat that second choice, of course, Uncle Chuck. Another one we have to mention is getting some play, and I mentioned it a little bit already, Matt, is Caracaro. And you know what? Uncle Chuck is a son of Uncle Mo who's had 2 starts. Caracaro is a son of Uncle Mo who's had 3 starts for Gustavo Delgado, and after a pretty lengthy layoff of over 6 months, he came back with a pretty sharp effort in the Peter Pan, went second to Country Grammar.
Yeah, I agree with that, Brian. To me, Caracaro has the feeling of a horse that is getting better, has the feeling of a horse who can maybe make another step up in the Travers. I don't know. I'm not as convinced about the distance with others, but I do like the price that we will get on Caracaro. Brian, probably the 4th choice or so in this race, and Caracaro is going to be one of the horses that I use in the exacta instead of Uncle Chuck.
Yeah, Caracaro, Matt, I don't see him any lower than the 5th choice, and perhaps potentially the 6th choice if they bet Bill Mott's new horse South Bend a little bit. So Caracaro, I think you're going to get double digits on. You did say it, though. My one worry about Caracaro is the distance, 1.25 miles. He ran a nice enough race, like we said, in that Peter Pan off the layoff, and he could move forward. He's got good tactical speed. He showed a lot of potential in those first 2 maiden races down in Florida. However, I wonder if that Peter Pan just started near the end of the race to show his distance limitations a little bit. Now he gets a furlong more against a better field. But an interesting long shot and one that could move forward. If you're talking 2-1, 5-2 on Uncle Chuck versus 12-15 to 1 on Caracaro, it does make you think a little bit about 2 up-and-coming Uncle Mo's and their value in the Travers. I think the last horse that would be under 20 to 1, Matt, is South Bend. He's the one that I mentioned would buy for 5th choice, if you will, with Caracaro. That's South Bend. He ran a very good race in the Ohio Derby. And interestingly, for the son of algorithms, there's a few things interesting about him. He had 5 consecutive tries in turf stakes races. He didn't win any of them. He ran pretty well in some of them. But 5 consecutive races on the turf. Then they bring him back to dirt, runs a really good race. He may have been best in that Ohio Derby because he really made up a lot of ground when running second, fast closing second to Dean Martini in the Ohio Derby. Now he moves to the barn of Bill Mott and he gets 1.25 miles.
Yeah, it is certainly interesting. South Bend is a horse who pretty impressively won his first 2 races and then has been racing pretty exclusively in stakes company against some quality fields. And every race he has seemingly shown up. Dirt in the beginning of his career, then those 5 turf starts, and then got switched to the Ohio Derby. And again, another 2nd place finish, but it was a really good one. And he came running. It's Bill Mott. There's, I find him interesting in this race. And like you said, Brian, the odds are definitely going to be there. Yeah. South Bend is interesting to me as well. And in fact, if you're looking at vertical wagers, if you're looking at trifectas,
superfectas, and maybe even an exacta. South Bend makes a lot of sense to me. You're talking about a horse who's 15-1 or more probably, and a horse I think who probably his experience level and the way he finishes off races makes me think he can make some noise in the stretch of the Travers. Also, I think he might be a dirt horse. It's strange to say after those 5 straight turf races, but he's a stakes winner on dirt. And that Ohio Derby was a good effort. So South Bend, certainly a horse that I will be using underneath in my exotics. The last 2, Matt, I'm going to mention them together, are Chivalry and First Line. First Line's only a maiden winner, and Chivalry is a certain horse, certain speed horse who you would expect to make the lead early in the Travers.
Yeah, absolutely. First Line, who's breaking from the rail, just broke his maiden at Saratoga a week or so ago. Trainer Orlando Noda is on fire at Saratoga. He is winning virtually every race he puts a horse in, and apparently he's been touting this horse First Line as a potential Kentucky Derby horse since he began his career. Please note that this was his 4th try to break his maiden.
Yeah, he did get a win over Saratoga. It was a game win, but I'm not sure about 10 furlongs for the Orlando Noda horse, and I'm certainly not sure about the jump in class from that maiden race to the Travers. Chivalry, Chivalry's a stakes-winning sprinter who stretched out pretty gamely in a few races down in Florida, most notably went second in the Florida Derby behind Tiz the Law. His last race, where he faced pressure from the Philly Swiss Skydiver and the Bluegrass, he packed it up early. Now they stretch him out to 10 furlongs, and despite Saratoga being speed friendly this year, and maybe nobody pressures him too much too early, I think Caracaro and Uncle Chuck and Tiz the Law not far behind. I think eventually they catch up to Chivalry, and it's just a matter of how quickly they go by him. I can't see Chivalry doing much than being a pace factor, Matt. I've kind of alluded to, folks, what I like in here. I think Tiz the Law is strictly the one to beat. Max Player will be my play because I think he's 6-1 at the lowest. I think he might even be higher. And I want to sprinkle in South Bend a little bit underneath in the exotics.
Yeah, I have similar thinking, Brian. I don't think they're going to beat Tiz the Law. I am going to recommend some exactas with Tiz the Law on top of Max Player, Caracaro, and South Bend, and I'm going to hope that Uncle Chuck doesn't get the distance.
Yeah, we're both trying to beat Uncle Chuck here, folks. And if you're an Uncle Chuck fan, I think I, for one, could see him running a big race. But 2 lifetime starts as a heavy second choice, I'm willing to take a shot against. I'm going to give you one simple bet for me in the Travers. I'm gonna go with my pseudo long shot a little bit here. I'm gonna do a $20 exacta box. Tiz the Law, Max Player. Those are the 2 I like best. I expect Tiz the Law to win. Max Player running second would be fine, but just in case Max Player runs a huge race, I'm going to have that exacta box. Tiz the Law and Max Player. All right, Matt, on the same day, there's a bunch of stakes, but there's one in particular we need to talk about here on HorseCenter because people were gaga over the performance, and rightly so. People were gaga over the performance of Gamine when last seen winning the Grade 1 Acorn at Belmont on Belmont Stakes Day. In the Acorn, she looked like a world beater. Now she comes back to the 7 furlong test. I think that puts an end to anyone wanting her in the Kentucky Derby, those thoughts. But it still could be a prep for the 9 furlong Kentucky Oaks. 7 furlong test, Matt. I will say this. There is some speed in here for Gamine to deal with.
Yeah, gaga for Gamine. That's certainly what's going to happen in the Travers. That 18-length victory in the Acorn, which made Gamine 3 for 3, but subsequently the one of those victories at Oaklawn Park was taken away from Gamine because of that drug violation by Baffert. The Acorn received a 110 buyer speed figure, which is the second highest figure of the year for any any kind of horse. So more reason for everybody to be gaga in that race.
Yeah, Gaga, and in this 6-horse field in the test, Matt, I think Gaga is going to translate to about 2 to 5. All right, now Gamin certainly can win the test. We're not dummies. We're not saying Gamin's not going to win the test or couldn't win the test. That is, but again, we're handicapping this race, folks, and we're handicapping the odds a little bit. We're handicapping with the odds. We're telling you where the value is, and for me, Gamin might be the best 3-year-old filly in the country, and she might just run off the screen in this test. But for me, at 2 to 5 or so, with speed horses like Wicked Whisper and Venetian Harbor in there, I got to take a shot to beat her. I really see this 7 furlong test. This is a sprint, but it's an elongated sprint. 7 furlongs is a tough sprint distance to go as hard as you can the entire race. With Wicked Whisper and Venetian Harbor able to run 44s for a half mile, I think Amin has her work cut out for her. So I'm going to take a shot against her. And it's not with the other speed horses, maybe the second and third choice on the morning line, Venetian Harbor, Wicked Whisper. I think you have 3 interesting horses that could rally in a test. The other 3 horses in the race, and that's Up in Smoke, and Mrs. Danvers. I'm looking maybe at the longest shot on the board, or at least one of the longest shots on the board. I'm looking at Mrs. Danvers as a horse who could really surprise here. I've liked her ever since her debut. I don't like the last race, but I think with a super fast pace, 7 furlongs, she could run a good race.
Yeah, I think that might be the case. And you know, I think it's worth noting with Venetian Harbor, is now cutting back to 7 furlongs, which I think is a much more ideal distance for Venetian Harbor than what she faced when she was second in the Ashland at Keeneland and second in the Fantasy at Oaklawn Park. But yeah, she's, you know, running into the speed of Gamine and Wicked Whisper in there. I don't know, Brian. I'm not as excited about Mrs. Danvers. I gave Mrs. Danvers an excuse 2 races back when she was second in an allowance at Belmont, looking forward to coming back and running big. And I was really disappointed with her performance last time out. The number 2, Perfect Alibi, comes in for Mark Casse. She was 2 for 2 last year at Saratoga, but was 5th in the Acorn in her 2020 debut. The Casse barn has just been flat out ice cold at Saratoga. The one that interests me a little bit is Up in Smoke for George Weaver. He typically does well at Saratoga. This horse is showing a 5th in the victory ride at Belmont Park. Did win a stake at Gulfstream Park earlier in the year. I guess if I'm picking a long shot upsetter in the test, it's going to be Up in Smoke.
Yeah, Matt, certainly Up in Smoke is an interesting long shot as well. She might get played a little bit more. I didn't love her race in the victory of the ride last time at Belmont. But again, this pace setup, 7 furlongs. And Gamine and Venetian Harbor certainly is the favorite. The second choice could run around the track 1-2 all the way, and just talented speed of Wicked Whisper. But it's at 7 furlongs with this kind of pace, I'm willing to take a shot. Up in Smoke, probably the one I like. Second best of the rallying long shots. Perfect Alibi, 2 for 2 in graded stakes at Saratoga last year. So you at least have to give her a look. Although her race when beaten over 30 lengths in the Acorn, her only race this year was not good. Mrs. Danvers, you said an allowance race 2 starts back, but I really like that because she ran a rallying second to an older stakes winner who I think is very talented. Last one was a disappointment, but getting the right pace set up at a track I know she likes. She ran well here last year. And after the last one, she'll be 20-1. So I'm willing to take a shot on Mrs. Danvers. It might be an opportunity to hit a bomb in the test this year if we're right about the pace, though, with Gamine is such a heavy favorite. Matt, finally, before we end the show, I want to go out to Kentucky, Ellis Park. I never thought we'd be talking about a big Kentucky Derby prep at Ellis Park, but here we are. And we have one of the Kentucky Derby favorites, honestly, because Art Collector is on a roll. Looks like it's going to be a big field. We're waiting for the draw later today from Ellis Park, but it looks like it's going to be a full field. And to me, you really have to start this conversation with Art Collector from the Tom Drury barn, who's been terrific at Churchill Downs this year, and then a very nice winner of the Bluegrass.
Yeah, all of a sudden, after those nice allowance wins, Art Collector unleashed a big performance in the Bluegrass and suddenly became one of the top 4 or 5 contenders for the Kentucky Derby, which, certainly makes you interesting looking at the potential Kentucky Derby field and saying, wow, this is a very top heavy field, and the bottom 13 or 14 horses, if there's 20 in there, are maybe fairly suspect.
Yeah, we were talking about Tiz the Law kind of punctuating his favoritism for the Kentucky Derby by winning the Travers on Saturday. I really believe that if Art Collector can do something similar in the Ellis Park Derby that he did in the Bluegrass, he's going to become the second choice for the Kentucky Derby. So Art Collectors look terrific. Look, his dirt form, they switched him to dirt, and he had a funky race where he completely lost it on the turn and then came running late. After that, he was taken down once, but after that, he's just been a machine on the dirt, including 2 more recent races this year at Churchill Downs and then that Bluegrass. It took him a little while to get by Swiss Skydiver. I have a lot of respect for that filly, but then he rolled late. It looks like he doesn't mind going the distance. The Ellis Park Derby, a heavy favorite in a big field. Always want to try to beat him, but I'm not sure who can beat him in this race if he continues what he's been doing lately. A very interesting, kind of late blooming horse. We never really would have known about him as a Derby horse had the Derby been a normal time frame this year. I guess the horse I like second best out of the probables for the Ellis Park Derby, Matt, is Shared Sense. And Shared Sense is a horse who ran against Art Collector unsuccessfully 2 starts back. I will say, though, that was the race where Art Collector got a really easy pace, and Shared Sense didn't have much of a chance. Well beaten second behind him that day, Shared Sense came back with a nice win in the Indiana Derby next.
Yeah, that's for sure. From the barn of Brad Cox, who can get horses ready at the right time. Yeah, you have to be impressed with the progress that Art Collector has made. But, we've talked about it before. These winning streaks don't go on forever. So in the Ellis Park Derby, I'm definitely going to be willing to take a shot against Art Collector with Brad Cox and Shared Sense.
Yeah, Shared Sense is the horse that I think has a shot too. And I think Shared Sense, the Godolphin horse, is getting better. He's also spent a little time on turf. He's getting better at the right time. I could see him running very well in the Ellis Park Derby, and as well, maybe being a live long shot for the Kentucky Derby. Then you got a lot of horses in here, Matt, who are eligible to pop up. It's a deep field, a bunch of good horses. I just can't get excited about any of them. Dean Martini is coming off a win in the Ohio Derby where he was on or near the lead most of the way. And earlier I said I thought South Bend may have been the best horse in that race. I know Dior. I know there's a horse I touted over the winter holiday and really hasn't got it done this year. But I thought he showed a little bit more last time in the San Antonio Derby. Maybe he can pop up. He'd probably be my third choice in here. And then you got a few others, Necker Island and the Dale Romans horse, Attachment Rate, who's been kind of hitting the board-ish in a lot of these races. But I don't know. To me, it really starts with that allowance race, 2 starts back, Art Collector and Shared Sense. Everybody else, I just can't get too crazy for.
Yeah, I feel the same way. There, besides those top ones that we mentioned, there's a bunch of horses whose names have popped up at various times in the 3-year-old races and had decent performance. Necker Island, Little Menace, as you mentioned, Attachment Rate, and Dean Martini. But they don't really excite me in there. So, as I said, I'm going to take a shot with Shared Sense.
Matt's on Shared Sense. I'll give out a straight try of Art Collector's Shared Sense and a No Dior just for fun in the Ellis Park Derby. Now, before we go, let's talk a little bit about last week. The Whitney was very disappointing to me for a variety of reasons. I was glad to see Improbable. I thought he looked better as a 4-year-old, and he proved it in the Whitney. But it was just a strange race, and I just don't think that every horse in the race got a really fair shot in this race.
Yeah, I agree, Brian. You know, the start of that race has been replayed a lot of times, and I don't know, Brian, I've seen it about 10 times, and I really feel like the race ended when the starting gates opened. If you watch it carefully, everybody was focused on Improbable because of his past misbehaviors in the starting gate, and it happened again. They got Improbable in the gate, and he reared up, and it just seemed to me like the starter, and I understand it, was really focused on Improbable because he was misbehaving. And you watch and see Improbable reared up, and all the other horses turned their heads and looked over, kind of saying, like, what the heck is going on down there? And it looked like the starter said, you know, as soon as Improbable calmed down and got his feet on the ground, he sprung the gates. But at that moment, Tom's d'Etat had been distracted. Code of Honor had been distracted. And it was Tom's d'Etat that got the worst of it. He didn't have his feet under him. He didn't go down all the way, but definitely knees bent, and that's not what we expected from Tom's d'Etat. We expected him to come out running, get a nice spot behind the pace, and things just didn't happen. And after Improbable settled down, everything went his way.
Yeah, Improbable, took advantage of everything. I never thought I'd see a 25-plus first quarter in the Whitney. It happened. I'm not sure why it happened, but it was a small field. And Tom's d'Etat, I thought, ran a really admirable race, actually, after the terrible start and the terribly slow fractions, for him to make up a fair amount of ground in the stretch. I thought it was a very good performance. Tom's d'Etat has been my Breeders' Cup Classic horse pretty much all year, and I'm sticking with him. There's nothing in the Whitney that makes me get off Tom's d'Etat right now. Improbable keeps moving forward. By my standards, doesn't look quite good enough to get by horses like Improbable or Tom's d'Etat. And Code of Honor, folks, people give me a hard time about picking Code of Honor in several races, and he's won several races, but he's lost several races as well. And I saw one comment last week on HorseCenter, and they said, well, if it's a slow pace, then the horses coming from behind will just be closer to the pace, and then they can move from there. And folks, that's just not how horse racing works. The pressure of the race, the pressure of the speed makes it for closers. If there's no pressure, if there's no pace, closers don't want to be 2 lengths off that and then all of a sudden kick it in. They want to be coming from farther behind with pace pressure. Code of Honor really had no chance after the 25 first quarter. I knew it right then that he was not going to do it. That's just not the kind of horse he is. I would expect him to run much better when there's just a little bit more pace. So don't forget about Code of Honor moving forward. But for me, Tom's d'Etat remains the horse to beat for the Breeders' Cup Classic. Echo Town, big performance. Collusion Illusion, 2 top 3-year-old sprinters, Matt. Honor AP, I was a little disappointed with the Shared Belief, but I think the way the race was run, I'm not getting off him for the Kentucky Derby. And I was pretty shocked that Midnight Pursuit lost, but Vexatious clearly is getting better.
Vexatious fired a huge performance in that race, coming off a really good start before the personal ensign. So no reason to be worried about Midnight Pursuit in there. I feel a little bit, maybe there's a little bit more reason to be worried about Honor AP and his training methods heading up into that Shared Belief, because to me, he never looked like he had a chance to win coming down the stretch.
Yeah, that's true. And sometimes it's the way the race is set up. But yeah, I don't think he looked 100% for sure. And I'm hoping for a lot more. But I think a mile and a quarter will be his game. As far as Midnight Bassu, the one thing I will say is, she was bumped a little bit. Maybe that cost her. But I think the result of the personal ensign makes it even more likely that we'll see her go after a third try in the Breeders' Cup Distaff versus the Breeders' Cup Classic. Matt, can I get a parting shot from you on our Travers show?
Yeah, hey, as Brian had said, we're excited about these big races this weekend at Saratoga. Good luck at your wagering. And as always, I want to thank our producer, Brett Workman, for putting together the show.
Yeah, thanks to Brett. Thanks for all you watching every week. We sure do appreciate it. If you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel here on Horse Racing Nation, please do so now. We appreciate that as well. We also want to thank our sponsor, Derby Wars, the best contest site out there. Folks, we will be back next week with another big show right here on HorseCenter. See you